Have you noticed something unusual happening in the global food market? While many American rice exporters are searching for new overseas buyers after seasons of trade uncertainty, another story is quietly unfolding nearly 6,000 miles away. In Burkina Faso, thousands of farmers are celebrating harvests that, only a few years ago, many believed were impossible. One country is looking for customers. The other is asking a very different question. What if we never need to rely on imported rice again? That contrast is attracting attention far beyond West Africa. In a small village outside Baghri, an elderly farmer watches his grandson load sacks of freshly harvested rice onto a truck headed for a nearby processing center. For most of his life, imported rice filled the markets, while local fields struggled to compete. Today, he smiles as he sees rice grown by Burkinabe hands feeding Burkinabe families. To him, these fields represent more than another successful harvest. They represent dignity, confidence, and the belief that the future can be built from the country's own soil. If you believe Africa deserves the opportunity to build its own food future, press like, subscribe, and stay with us for today's report. But this story is about much more than agriculture. It is about economic independence. It is about reducing dependence on foreign imports. And it is about a strategy that many believe could gradually reshape how Burkina Faso participates in regional trade. As local rice production continues to expand, some analysts are beginning to ask a larger question. If Burkina Faso succeeds in replacing more imported rice with domestic production, what could that mean for exporters who once viewed Africa as one of their fastest-growing markets? The answer may reveal that this is not simply a story about rice. It could be the beginning of a much larger economic transformation. For decades, the United States has been one of the world's largest agricultural exporters. American farmers have helped feed millions of people across every continent, supplying rice, wheat, corn, soybeans, and countless other products to global markets. Yet, in recent years, international trade has become increasingly complex. Trade disputes, rising production costs, changing weather patterns, and growing competition from other exporting nations have forced many producers to rethink where future demand will come from. For exporters, every emerging market matters. Every country that increases food imports can become a valuable customer. Every country that produces more of its own food may gradually reduce that dependence. This is not unusual. It is part of how economies develop over time. That broader trend helps explain why agricultural developments in Africa are drawing more international attention than they once did. Burkina Faso has long relied on imported rice to help meet domestic demand. Despite having fertile valleys, experienced farmers, and significant agricultural potential, local production often struggled to keep pace with population growth. Imported rice became a familiar sight in markets across the country because it was available, consistent, and often affordable. But over the last several years, the conversation has begun to change. Instead of asking how to import more food, policymakers have increasingly discussed how to produce more food at home. Supporters of this approach argue that reducing dependence on imports can strengthen food security, create rural employment, and keep more economic value inside the country. For many Burkinabe farmers, that discussion is not abstract. It is deeply personal. Just outside the Baghri irrigation zone, a farmer named Ousmane begins his day before sunrise. Like his father and grandfather before him, he has spent most of his life working the land. There were years when imported rice dominated local markets, making it difficult for small producers to compete. Some neighbors abandoned farming altogether, believing there was little future in growing rice locally. Today, Ousmane sees signs of cautious optimism, improved irrigation, better organization among farming cooperatives, and growing interest in local production have given many families reason to invest in their fields again. His harvest is not simply measured in sacks of rice. It is measured in school fees paid, equipment repaired, and confidence slowly returning to the village. Across the Atlantic, American farmers are confronting a different set of questions. How can they remain competitive in an increasingly crowded global market? How should they adapt as countries seek greater agricultural self-sufficiency? Those questions are not unique to Burkina Faso. Similar discussions are taking place across Asia, Latin America, and other parts of Africa. As economies grow, many governments naturally explore ways to produce more essential goods domestically whenever conditions allow. Supporters of Burkina Faso's agricultural strategy see rice as more than a crop. They see it as a foundation. Food security affects public health, household spending, and national resilience. A country that produces more of its staple foods may become less vulnerable to disruptions in international supply chains or sudden increases in global prices. That does not mean international trade disappears. Rather, the balance may gradually evolve. Instead of relying primarily on imports, a country may seek a healthier combination of domestic production and carefully managed trade. For agricultural economists, this transition is often viewed as part of a broader development process rather than a rejection of international markets. Inside Burkina Faso, discussions increasingly focus on practical questions. How can irrigation be expanded? How can storage losses be reduced? How can young people view agriculture as a modern profession instead of a last resort? These questions matter because growing more rice is only one part of the challenge. Harvests must also be transported, processed, stored, financed, and sold efficiently. Without those supporting systems, production alone cannot transform an economy. That reality is understood by many young professionals returning to agriculture. One of them is Awa, an agricultural engineer who recently joined a regional farming initiative. Some of her classmates chose careers abroad, but she decided to remain in Burkina Faso because she believes modern agriculture offers opportunities to improve both livelihoods and national resilience. Her work combines satellite mapping, irrigation planning, and training programs for local farmers. She often tells younger students that agriculture today requires science as much as tradition. Healthy soil, reliable water, better seed selection, improved logistics. These are the tools she believes will shape the country's future. Many African economists argue that the greatest value of these investments is not measured only by harvest size. It is measured by confidence. When farmers believe they can earn stable incomes, they invest more. When families invest more, local businesses expand. When local businesses expand, transportation companies, equipment suppliers, food processors, and market vendors all benefit. This creates what economists sometimes describe as a multiplier effect, where improvements in one sector encourage growth in many others. That possibility is one reason why agriculture remains central to development strategies across much of the continent. For President Ibrahim Traoré and his administration, supporters often describe food production as one element of a broader effort to strengthen domestic capacity. Public statements have emphasized increasing local production, improving infrastructure, and encouraging greater economic self-reliance where feasible. Whether every objective can be achieved remains to be seen. Agricultural transformation takes years, sometimes decades. It depends on rainfall, investment, infrastructure, financing, education, and political stability. Yet many citizens believe the direction itself is important. In conversations across farming communities, the language has begun to change. People speak less about surviving one season. They speak more about preparing for the next. That subtle shift in mindset may be one of the most significant developments of all. Meanwhile, observers elsewhere in Africa are paying close attention. Officials, researchers, and farming organizations in neighboring countries continue to exchange ideas about irrigation, seed quality, storage systems, and regional cooperation. Although every country faces different circumstances, many share similar goals: improving food security, supporting rural communities, and reducing unnecessary dependence on imports where local production is viable. No single harvest will transform an economy overnight. No single policy will solve every challenge. But each successful season can strengthen confidence that gradual change is possible. And perhaps that is the larger story beginning to emerge from Burkina Faso. The conversation is becoming less about replacing imported rice alone and more about building an agricultural system capable of supporting long-term economic resilience. If that foundation continues to grow, the next chapter may not be written only in rice fields. It may be written in processing plants, irrigation networks, regional trade corridors, and the choices made by a new generation that increasingly sees agriculture not as the past, but as part of Africa's future. As the harvests improve, another question begins to emerge. Growing more rice is one achievement. Building an economy around that success is something far more ambitious. Every sack of rice harvested inside Burkina Faso creates a choice. It can be consumed locally, processed by domestic businesses, stored for future food security, or eventually traded within the region. Each of those options keeps more economic activity inside the country than if the rice had simply been imported from abroad. That idea has become increasingly important for many economists studying agricultural development across Africa. The value of agriculture is rarely limited to what grows in the field. A successful harvest creates work for truck drivers transporting grain to storage facilities. It creates demand for mill operators who process rice into food ready for market. It supports mechanics who maintain farming equipment, small businesses that manufacture packaging, and merchants who sell products in local markets. One productive season can generate opportunities far beyond the farm itself. In Bobo Dioulasso, Mariam owns a small rice milling business that once struggled to secure enough locally grown rice to keep her machines operating throughout the year. During slower seasons, employees worked fewer hours, and some were forced to look for temporary jobs elsewhere. Today, she says the situation is gradually improving. More farmers are delivering rice to her facility. The milling machines operate more consistently. Young workers who once planned to leave for larger cities are beginning to see opportunities closer to home. For Mariam, the greatest change is not measured only by higher production. It is measured by stability. When farmers succeed, she explains, everyone connected to farming has a better chance to succeed as well. Stories like hers illustrate why many development specialists argue that agriculture should not be viewed as an isolated sector. It is closely connected to transportation, manufacturing, finance, education, energy, and local entrepreneurship. When these sectors develop together, rural communities become more resilient. Supporters of Burkina Faso's current agricultural direction often point to this broader picture. Their argument is straightforward. Producing more food locally is important, but creating an entire value chain around that production is what can generate lasting economic benefits. That requires continued investment in irrigation systems, modern storage facilities, processing equipment, rural roads, agricultural research, and technical education. Without those supporting pieces, larger harvests alone may not produce lasting prosperity. Across West Africa, similar conversations are taking place. Countries throughout the region continue exploring ways to strengthen food security while expanding trade with neighboring states. Regional organizations have increasingly emphasized improving agricultural productivity and reducing barriers that make it difficult for locally produced food to reach nearby markets. For Burkina Faso, regional trade could eventually become an important part of that long-term vision. If domestic production consistently exceeds local demand, neighboring countries may represent natural markets for agricultural products. Such opportunities, however, depend on many factors, including infrastructure, transportation costs, market prices, quality standards, and regional cooperation. Nothing about this process is automatic. It requires planning, investment, and patience. Even so, the possibility has inspired many young Africans who see agriculture differently than previous generations did. At the National School of Agriculture, students discuss precision irrigation, climate-resilient farming, improved seed varieties, and digital tools that help farmers monitor weather and soil conditions. They speak about agriculture not simply as manual labor, but as engineering, logistics, business management, and innovation. For them, modern farming represents an opportunity to solve practical problems while contributing to national development. Their optimism reflects a broader shift in perspective. For decades, many talented young graduates believed success required leaving rural communities behind. Today, some are choosing a different path, not because agriculture has become easy, but because they believe it can become more productive, more innovative, and more rewarding than before. Supporters of President Ibrahim Traoré often describe this change in attitude as one of the most important foundations for long-term progress. They argue that national development depends not only on public investment, but also on restoring confidence that local talent can solve local challenges. Whether that vision succeeds will depend on consistent implementation and measurable results over many years. Agricultural transformation cannot be completed in a single season. It is built harvest after harvest, project after project, and generation after generation. Yet, every successful planting season strengthens an important idea: that Africa's future does not have to be defined only by the resources beneath its soil. It can also be shaped by the food growing on its fields, the businesses created around those harvests, and the communities strengthened through steady economic opportunity. Perhaps that is why observers across the continent continue watching Burkina Faso's agricultural journey with interest. Not because one country has discovered a perfect solution, but because many are asking the same question: if sustained investment in local agriculture can gradually improve livelihoods, strengthen food security, and expand regional trade, what lessons might other nations adapt to their own circumstances? The answer will not be written by speeches alone. It will be written in harvest reports, household incomes, thriving local businesses, and the opportunities created for the next generation of African farmers, engineers, entrepreneurs, and educators. And if those foundations continue to grow stronger, the story unfolding in Burkina Faso may become part of a much larger conversation about how agriculture can contribute to economic resilience across an entire region. As Burkina Faso works towards strengthening its agricultural sector, the discussion naturally extends beyond national borders. Food has always been more than a commodity. It influences household budgets, public health, employment, trade, and national resilience. Because of that, changes in agricultural policy often attract attention from governments, researchers, development organizations, and businesses around the world. For Burkina Faso, the immediate challenge is not simply producing more rice. It is maintaining that progress. Better harvests must be supported by reliable irrigation systems, affordable financing, improved transportation networks, efficient storage facilities, and stable access to regional markets. Without these foundations, even successful harvests can face unnecessary losses. Many development specialists point to post-harvest waste as one of agriculture's greatest hidden challenges. Crops that never reach consumers represent lost income for farmers and missed opportunities for local economies. That is why investments beyond the farm remain essential. Roads, warehouses, processing plants, cold storage, agricultural research, vocational education. Each of these contributes to long-term resilience. For families living in rural communities, these improvements are often felt in practical ways. A shorter drive to market means lower transportation costs. Reliable storage means fewer crops spoil before they can be sold. A nearby processing facility creates local jobs that allow young people to remain in their communities instead of searching for work elsewhere. These changes may appear small when viewed individually. Together, however, they can gradually reshape local economies. Supporters of President Ibrahim Traoré frequently describe agriculture as one pillar of a broader strategy aimed at strengthening domestic production and reducing avoidable economic dependence. Public discussions have also emphasized industrial development, infrastructure, and regional cooperation alongside agricultural investment. Whether these goals are fully achieved will depend on consistent implementation, available resources, security conditions, and long-term planning. Transformation is rarely immediate. History shows that countries achieving lasting agricultural growth often do so over many years through steady improvements rather than sudden breakthroughs. Across Africa, these developments are being observed with interest. Governments throughout the continent continue exploring different approaches to strengthening food systems while balancing participation in international trade. Each country faces unique geographic, economic, and political conditions. There is no single model that fits every nation, yet one common objective appears repeatedly: greater resilience, the ability to produce more essential food domestically while remaining connected to regional and global markets. In many ways, Burkina Faso has become part of that wider conversation, not because it has solved every challenge, but because it represents one example of a country seeking to expand domestic agricultural capacity under difficult circumstances. Researchers, policymakers, and development organizations continue watching these efforts to understand which strategies produce measurable results and which require further adjustment. Beyond Africa, international businesses and agricultural analysts are also monitoring changes in food production across emerging markets. Whenever countries increase domestic production, global trade patterns can gradually evolve. Some import demand may decline. New regional trade opportunities may emerge. Investment priorities may shift. These adjustments are normal features of an evolving global economy rather than evidence of a zero-sum competition. American agriculture remains one of the world's largest and most productive sectors, supplying food to millions across the globe. At the same time, many developing countries continue working toward greater food security through increased local production. Both realities can exist simultaneously. Rather than viewing these developments as opposing stories, many economists see them as part of the broader evolution of international agriculture. Countries seek the balance that best serves their own populations while continuing to participate in global commerce. For young Africans, however, the meaning of this discussion often feels much more personal. At a secondary school outside Ouagadougou, students recently visited nearby rice fields as part of an agricultural education program. One teacher asked a simple question: "What do you see when you look across these fields?" Some answered, "Food." Others answered, "Jobs." One student quietly replied, "I see choices." That answer captured something difficult to express with statistics alone. Economic development is not measured only by production figures. It is measured by opportunities. The opportunity for farmers to earn stable incomes, the opportunity for entrepreneurs to build businesses, the opportunity for engineers to apply their skills at home, the opportunity for young people to believe that success can be created within their own communities. Those opportunities are ultimately what many agricultural reforms hope to expand. No single policy can guarantee that outcome. No harvest can erase every challenge. Climate variability, infrastructure constraints, financing, and security concerns remain significant realities that Burkina Faso, like many countries, must continue addressing. Even so, many citizens believe progress begins with confidence. Confidence encourages investment. Investment encourages innovation. Innovation creates new opportunities, and opportunity strengthens communities. Perhaps that is the deeper lesson emerging from Burkina Faso's agricultural journey. The story is not only about producing more rice, it is about asking whether agriculture can become the foundation for broader economic resilience. Whether that vision succeeds will be determined over time by measurable results, practical implementation, and the resilience of the people working every day to make it possible. History often remembers dramatic speeches and headline-making events, yet some of history's most meaningful changes begin quietly. A new irrigation canal, a repaired milling machine, a farmer planting a better crop, a student deciding to study agricultural engineering, a family choosing locally grown food because they trust what their own land can produce. These moments rarely make international headlines, but together, they help shape the future. Perhaps that is why the conversation surrounding Burkina Faso's agricultural development continues to grow. It is less about one season's harvest and more about a larger question. Can long-term investment in agriculture strengthen economic resilience, improve livelihoods, and expand opportunity for future generations? Only time will provide the complete answer. But across the rice fields of Burkina Faso, that future is already being planted one harvest, one family, and one community at a time. If today's story gave you a new perspective, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Where are you watching from? And what role do you believe agriculture should play in Africa's future? Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the next report.